Hello, welcome to IUN Community Garden Presentation, Vertical Gardening. I'm Leslie Kaiser, the moderator for today's session. Paxton Suggs is our presenter. After a decade working in and around the classroom as a high school English teacher, Paxton began searching for ways to more effectively reach students that had not been well served by traditional educational approaches. Through his research, he came across the work of Booker T. Washington and his Tuskegee Institute. With that model in mind, Paxton left the classroom to learn to work the land so that he might be able to offer children experiences that integrated all of the content of traditional classrooms, as well as exposure to whole and healthy foods, with an emphasis on using the fruits of both their newfound knowledge and labor to feed their loved ones and communities. Paxton now works as greenhouse manager at the East Chicago Greenhouse. Paxton, we're glad to have you with us today.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I see a good few names that I recognize, so I hope you are all doing well. I'm kind of in a makeshift office space here. As you might imagine, greenhouses don't very often have Wi-Fi, so I've had to corner myself away in the back office to find somewhere where we can do this from. Also, unfortunately, that means that I won't be able to kind of walk and talk with you through the greenhouse. So we'll have to rely on just my mediocre at best photos that I was able to take in the greenhouse. And hopefully that'll just serve as an enticement for you all to come visit us in person. So with that being said, let me go ahead and start sharing my screen. And this is, as it says, an introduction to vertical gardening. But as is often the case, many people, when they learn that we exist, are surprised to learn that we exist because we're kind of nestled away in a weird place. And so I just wanted to take a brief moment to kind of tell you a little bit about what we do and and how it's going. So the actual facility itself we have 4 grow bays, and we're about 15,000 square feet of grow space specifically. So that's not including little backside rooms and supply rooms and the like. If you're familiar with East Chicago at all, we're at 1615 East 142nd Street. We're directly north of St. Catherine's Hospital, at the north tip of Washington Park. This is a view from the backside of our facility, just to kind of show you our bays. And you can see they're labeled here from east to west, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Bays 1 and 2 are the oldest part of the greenhouse, and they are what you would generally associate with when you hear greenhouse. Oh, maybe not, I guess. But 1 and 2 are tropical rooms. So we've got, all kinds of fancy stuff in there with nicely manicured rocks and the like. It's meant to be a place for you to go that's more like a botanical garden than like a working greenhouse. Bays 3 and 4 are where we do the real work. And if you come to visit, you feel free to walk around in all of the bays. So here's just a few photos of our tropical room. You can see some petra there. We've got a lot of ornamental ginger on the sides. Those big boys in the middle are birds of paradise, giant birds of paradise. A lot of cool things going on in there. On the right-hand side, you can, if you squint a little bit, this didn't come out as well as I would have liked it to, but we've got bananas growing there. And they're nice edible bananas. We had some come in, I think, back in January, and now they're back around again. So we've got quite a few things going on there. In the bottom left-hand corner, we've got our nice little agave there. And just in the center there, we've got a nice little view of entering the tropical room. We've got the plastic dividers there. And then on the far right, we've got just a lemon tree peeking out, and we've got a key lime in the back there by the kind of Easter Island head deal, a lot of tea tree. It's a cute little place. Come take a walk around, bring a moisture rag to damp yourself because we keep it quite humid. We've got some kumquats there on the left-hand side. We've got some giant century agave, which we're actually working with. I don't know if any of you all have heard of Wild Rose Brewery, but the big boy in the back, it's about 12, 13 feet tall. It's got to go. It's growing out of space. So we are working with them to, they're going to do a little small batch ale, because they can't do tequila because that's a whole different license. But anyway, that should be a fun little project. It'd be a real shame to lose a plant that big and that nice and just put it in the trash. So we kind of worked to find something fun to do. So that's bays 1 and 2. And then in bay 3, we have our grow room. And this is kind of the star of the show. This is what everyone hears about and wants to learn more about. And this is our aquaponics system. So on the left-hand side here, you will see a 500-gallon tank that holds about, it starts off with 1,500 fish. You lose a fish here and there as they grow up. We get them as small guys, small fries, no more than 2 to 3 inches. And now I'd say they're in the 6 to 7. The females are in the 6 to 7 range. They're the ones that get big. The males don't tend to get too large, but they're growing. They're getting in there, and they're doing fine. It's always touch and go in the beginning. That's when they're the most sensitive, but as they grow up, they toughen up a bit. So they live their whole lives in that tank, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with the basics of aquaponics. It's really no different than hydroponics. The only difference is that instead of adding, what are usually chemical inputs, the fish are adding the nutrient input. And then one of the things people, I don't think, realize so much about with aquaponic growing situations is that the real thing that we're growing is the bacteria that make the fish waste processable by the plants themselves. So you can have the fish and you can have the water and you can have the plants, but if you don't have the bacteria, you really just have moist seeds, so to speak. So not so to speak, in actuality. So the real thing that we spend our time doing is, finessing the water so that it is the perfect environment for the proper bacteria to grow. And as a result of that, the fish thrive and the plants thrive as well. So altogether, about 15,000 gallons, 15,500, I guess, 15,000 gallons of growing space. Each trough there is about 50 feet long, 4 feet wide, 2 to 3 feet deep, maybe 3 feet deep. 300 to 600 plants. We have about 25 trays that we grow on. We call them rafts. They have holes in them. Each raft has 33 holes in them to accept plants. But depending on the plant, if you have something that really likes to spread out like a bok choy, you're not going to put 33 plants on that tray. You might only put 12 to 15. Whereas something like a dill, that's a lot more delicate, a lot smaller of a footprint, you can probably throw 30 in there and not really have an issue at all. So yeah, we just kind of keep that cycling, and we have at the very least bi-monthly giveaways where we give away to the community in partnership with either someone like Catholic Charities or the Food Bank of Northwest Indiana, and we're getting food out to the community. So we don't sell any of the food that we grow. All of it goes directly to the community who show up and say they need it. So that's a very unique opportunity and something that's very cool to be a part of. So here's just another photo of the system. And then in addition to the actual growing system in Bay 3, we've also begun growing in soil. And you can hopefully make out there that we've got we're using basically plastic growing bags. I'm sure all of you who are here have some interest in gardening and aren't coming from no background at all, and you'll know how popular the 5-gallon bucket size is for growing pretty sizable plants. I mean, there's really very little you can't grow in a 5-gallon bucket. The only problem with 5-gallon buckets is even when they're from Menards and nice and cheap, they're still $4 or $5 a pop. Multiply that by 100 plants and you're spending, you're spending more money than I personally am comfortable with spending on just the thing to fill up the soil with. So we've given it a shot with these plastic growing bags. They're about 25 to 30 cents a pop, which is much more my speed. And they're really doing excellently. You can see here, we've got full size pepper plants, even large pepper plants like poblanos. We have butternut squash that are growing out of these 5-gallon containers that are more than 10 feet tall at this point. So they really are proving themselves to be quite a nifty scenario. The only real issue I could see involved with them is if you were to cover up the drainage holes. You need to have the drainage holes because obviously plastic is not going to allow to drain. So when you're rolling over the top there, you can see they're white on the bottom and black on the top. The black is the bag rolled over. You just have to make sure you don't roll it over so that you cover up your drainage holes, because then you're going to have a problem. Just some more photos here. On the left, we've got our cucumber. In the middle, those are our poblanos. And then on the right-hand side, we have all of our squashes there. And then there's the fourth bay, which is our showroom. So that's where basically all of our ornamental plants, this is where we grow them. This is where we grow them. This is where we show them. This is where you buy them from. These are the only plants that we sell. So we've got a ton of, I have a slide later showing you all the plants that we grow, but all of these are propagated from, all of the house plants are propagated from the tropical room, and all of the flowers are grown from seed, which is a really big change from what we were doing in the past. But when you have a space like this, you got to go for it, right? So one of my things was, let's do this ourselves. We certainly have the infrastructure. Let's give it a shot. So yeah, we've got just a good amount of things going on. And I mean, I guess as you'll see here in a bit, the prices that we're offering on the house plants, they beat Menards pretty well. Every time I go into Menards, and I go into Menards quite frequently, I smile at myself like, haha, my spider plant's cheaper than your spider plant, kind of thing. So we've got a ton. I won't leave, this isn't a commercial or anything, but I just wanted to show you that we do have a wide selection of some fun stuff too. We've got the bananas and the cannas, and I actually put it in the same page twice. So you'll have to come in. It's a mystery what the other stuff we're talking about. So having said that, I do want to get to the vertical gardening. And here's some examples here. And this is, I think, what most people think of when they think of vertical gardening. And so in the bottom left-hand corner, this is a hydroponic system, very likely a nutrient film technique, where the water is going to be flowing from the top of the system to the bottom of the system, collecting in some sort of reservoir and then recirculating. And that's really nifty. That's a really cool little thing especially for growing lettuce. I meant to say that in our system, really what you're going to be growing in there are leafy greens. Anything that has a substantial root system, you risk clogging up the pipes and the tubing and stuff like that. So when you're dealing with our system, the way it's currently set up, there are ways that you could set it up where you could grow fruiting vegetables, your peppers, your tomatoes, things like that. But how it's set up right now, the roots really just, I don't even know if you guys can see me as well, but with my hands, I'm moving them like an octopus, and the roots really just swish around in there, which is problematic when you've got any current going on, because they're going to find their way in your pipe. So we have to keep it to systems that are pretty light in the roots, like you would in this bottom left-hand corner photo. The upper right-hand corner is basically the same thing, but it's turned vertically instead of horizontally on a vertical surface. And those are really nifty as well. You just pump it up to the top, it comes back down, and then you do the whole cycle again. So those are really two sides of the same coin. And then on the right-hand side, these are really popular, and variations of these are really popular, at least on my, whatever Google knows about me, Google knows that I'm interested in vertical gardening, and they show me planters that are based on this variation. And again, these are super cool. They're, the ones that I've seen are generally durable. I've seen a lot of DIY versions of this as well. And I think that's all nifty. But that's not any of the vertical gardening that I do, because one of the things that really guides my approach is being able to do this work extremely cheaply. And if you've ever gone online and looked at how much one of these planters costs, even if you're just going to Menards and buying PVC, the amount of PVC, the extra tools you need to have laying around, you really either need to already be a handyman who's kind of into plumbing, or you need to have, a nice wad of cash that you have set aside for your next bit of gardening. And neither of those things fit the bill for me. And I know a lot of people that doesn't fit the bill for. And working here in the greenhouse, when I'm thinking of how can I display things to people that they can do at home, because everybody probably doesn't have 15,000, have space for a 15,000 gallon aquaponics system. What can we do at home? How can we grow effectively? And that's how I ended up with kind of the approach we've taken here when it comes to vertical gardening. And when I say vertical gardening, what I'm talking about is any type of gardening that prioritizes vertical rather than horizontal space maximization. So when you think of square foot gardening, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, square foot gardening is trying to figure out on the horizontal plane, like on the ground, how can you plant most efficiently? The difference between vertical gardening and horizontal gardening in the largest, most maximal sense is how can we most efficiently grow using the smallest piece of land growing straight up. And that's what I want to talk about. And that's how we're going to organize this here. And there are really two main things that I want to talk about, which is we could call it your homebrew vertical gardening set. And that's to say, this guy on the right-hand side, I want to show you a method that I'm really terribly fond of that does the exact same thing. And I think, and definitely does it for much cheaper. And then on the left-hand side here, I'm going to show you how we're growing all of our squash, our peppers, our tomatoes. I mean, you name it, anything that grows up, you can grow it this way. And it might not be the perfect definition of vertical gardening in the sense that you think about most, but I think as we talk about it more, you'll see why I definitely classify it as being squarely in the realm of vertical gardening. So I want to start off here, and this is just a 2-minute video.
Traditional methods of growing potatoes are both labor-intensive and space-consuming. Long rows which must be tilled, fertilized, and raked into hills. Our preferred method is using potato towers. These towers allow you to grow a large amount of potatoes in a very small space. You don't need much in the way of materials to build potato towers. Some straw, any old straw will do, compost, soil, peat moss, manure, some rigid wire mesh, some strong wire or zip ties, and large garden stakes. The first thing you'll need to do is cut your rigid wire mesh to size and roll them into cylinders. Pound a large garden stake into the ground. You'll use this stake to hold up the tower, and using some strong pieces of wire or zip ties, secure the wire mesh to the stake. Next, mix your growing medium together. Combine equal amounts of soil, compost, manure, and peat moss. Use a garden hose to moisten the medium as you mix it together. Make sure the medium is thoroughly moistened. Once your mesh tower is secured to the garden stake and your growing medium is mixed together, you can start filling it. Start by adding a layer of straw to the bottom of the tower. 4 to 6 inches or so is a good amount to start with. Create a nest by patting down the straw in the middle with a garden hoe, pulling some towards the sides of the tower. Your seed potatoes can be chopped in half or quartered. Just make sure each piece of seed potato has an eye or two sprouting out of it. This ensures each piece will begin growing into a new plant. Into your straw nest, pour some of your growing medium, a few inches to start with. Arrange your seed potatoes around the outer edge of the nest you've created. Leave just enough space between the wire mesh and the potatoes and cover them completely on all sides and on top with growing medium. Once you've arranged a layer of seed potatoes in the tower, cover them with more growing medium so they are completely covered and surrounded. Next, grab some more straw and begin building another nest. Continue with all of the previous steps until you've either reached the top of the tower or you've run out of potatoes. Within a week or so, possibly less depending on the weather, you should see your potatoes beginning to grow, emerging from the sides of the tower. After a couple of weeks of growth, they'll really start to sprout out the sides and the top of the tower. And after a couple of months, your towers should be really filling out. Potatoes require quite a bit of water to grow well, so be sure to keep an eye on the moisture in the towers and water as needed.
Okay, so that's all I wanted to play from that, just for you to get the basic idea. Now, he's calling this a potato tower, but this only has to be a potato tower if you plant potatoes in it. It could, as you can grow, let me go back here and show this again. So just like our tower on the right here that has all these nice little inlets here, you can, literally take yourself something nice and pokey, and on the side of that guy, throughout the wire, you can plant your plugs in there. You can grow your seeds, plant them in plugs, throw your plug in there, and you can grow whatever in the world you need to grow inside of that thing. And it's got the amount of, I think I did the math, and for the equivalent of a 75-gallon barrel, I know you're all probably familiar with the big blue guys, which are 50-gallon barrels, but for the equivalent of a 75-gallon barrel, you can build one of those with $10 worth of chicken wire. And hopefully you can see on the right-hand side there, those are nice large entrances for you to be able to put your plugs, even if you went to Menards or Home Depot or whatever, and just got a tray of plugs and, stuck your fingers in there and then put your plants in there, they'll grow really nicely on the outside. And there's tons and tons of space to do that there. The other reason I really love that is, obviously, I think it's great to fill it up with, I think the mixture that they're using here of hay and whatever your soil is going to be that you're going to use. I think that's great. The hay saves space, saves money. But also, these towers, in almost exactly the same method, are used as compost bins, like long-term compost bins. So you can set these towers up this season, just throw all of your compost in there over the year. And then when you come back next year, you're going to be halfway there with all the soil and stuff that you need. So truly love that idea. That's the kind of thing you can knock out for $10 that will last you for as long as you want it to last. It's not going anywhere. It's not going to get brittle in the sun. It's not going to dry up. It's not going to cost you $90 and 5 days of shipping. This is exactly the kind of thing that you can grow. I can't think of a plant you couldn't grow out of this. You could grow a watermelon on top and lettuces around the sides. You could grow tomatoes out of it, especially if you combine it with the method that we're getting ready to talk about. This I think is the way to go. And it gives you the equivalent of very likely a 15 or 20 foot row, of horizontal planting right there in a 4 foot diameter circle that's 4 feet high. So I think that's the top of the tips. If anybody was new to gardening and wanted to figure out how to do it, bang for buck, labor, money, et cetera, and efficiency, I don't really think you can do better than that. And again, we're maximizing how we're using the space from the ground to the sky, as opposed to thinking about how much we can cram in left to right. So cool. I'm glad we got to talk about that. Now, this guy is my secret weapon. Some people have heard of him. Some people have seen him. Other people, their mind breaks when I show them this thing. I've never met a thing that has made my life and gardening easier than this product right here. So if you're not familiar with these things, please be prepared to have your mind blown. This is revolutionary. We're talking Thomas Edison levels of change here. So again, another very, very, very brief clip, just to show you operationally how these things work.
Today we're going to go over how to use tomato clips for indeterminate tomato varieties. This is a way to keep your tomatoes held up on a string. You just clip the back end of the clip in the string, find a branch, and then clip the clasp around the tomato, and that will hold up the tomato vine.
All right, that's it. I mean, it really is that simple. It allows you to dangle a string from anything, right? Anything that a string can dangle from. And then it locks itself positionally, vertically on the string, and then creates a space that will contain a stem of any sort. I don't know that in the garden I've encountered stems that would be thicker than at least stems that needed supporting that would be thicker than a tomato wire. What makes them genius though, is you can hang them from any string, which takes us to our next slide here, which is my favoriteest thing in the whole wide world, which make this whole tomato clip thing work. The 2x2 furring strip. As you all know, prices on wood has been very high recently, but even with the insane prices in wood, a 2x2 furring strip costs $3.50 from Menards, okay? You can go to Menards and you can get yourself 2 furring strips for $7 and bang them into the ground. This is not a complicated thing. Get yourself a step stool and a nice piece of, don't bang on the end directly, but you can bang it into the ground, and they're 8 feet tall. So you bang it a foot into the ground, it's not going anywhere. And then you can very easily take some $5 paracord, space them 10 feet apart, and you've got yourself what basically amounts to an old-timey clothesline. And from that clothesline, you can just throw twine over the top of it, combine it with your clips, and now you can grow directly vertically without having to mess around with tomato cages. Or I don't know how many of you out there have done a Florida weave before, but God bless you, because if you have messed with a Florida weave before, I wonder if you ever messed with it again. Oh my goodness, that thing is crazy. In the video, he mentioned that it was only for indeterminates, but that's not the case. If you have yourself a line running down, I don't know how many of you all are familiar with tomatillos and how kind of crazily tomatillos grow. They're very similar to like what you would think of as a bush tomato. They grow all over the place, but there's no maximum amount of line that you can run off of your clothesline, so you can infinitely support plants left, right, and center with your tomato clips, and you can do it in 2 seconds. You don't have to fight the plant. You don't have to wrestle with the plant. You don't have to, play twister. You don't have to do any of that stuff with the plant. You can just tie a knot, put it on the string, drip it down, and boop, put it right exactly where you want it. And it really does change the game. And what it does, especially for bush type tomatoes or peppers, is poblanos, because most of your small short guys, you don't need support. But for poblanos, for squashes, especially long squashes, cucumbers, et cetera, is it lets you keep it nice and tidy in the way that you want it, which, as we all know, is how you keep them pest and disease free. It lets you keep them away from each other. It lets you have great access to both the front and the back side of the leaf, so that if you have to apply any pest control kind of strategies, you're able to do that easily and conveniently. But it gives you the best of both worlds, where it lets you control your plants in a way where you don't have to bend yourself into a pretzel to do so. And again, when we're talking about the pricing here, the chicken wire that you see here on the bottom, that's 25 feet of chicken wire. That'll get you two of those potato planters, and I'm putting potato in quotations because they can be whatever planter you want. So that's $10 for each one. That'll get you 2 of them, and then for 100 of these clips, they'll go for $11 there on Amazon. So these are just like basic 101. Hey, either I don't have a lot of space, or if you're looking just for something new and fun and exciting to do that takes a lot of the hassle out of it, this is kind of the most accessible entry point into this idea that you can do tomorrow without having to get anything specialized or expensive. And everything except for the tomato clips are available literally right down the street from you. If you live in this area, right? Menards, Home Depot, Lowe's, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A few other odds and ends that you have: screws, string, twine, zip ties, elbow grease, whatever gets the job done. There's no hard and fast rules to this. Use a swing set. If you have T-posts out in the yard, you can use T-posts. I've set up a T-post and had string coming off of the off of the T-post to hold up tomato plants, where I've set the T-post in the middle because I just have extra ones laying around, and it kind of, each T-post looked a bit like a carnival. Like a carnival tent, where it just had strings coming around in circles and circles and circles. Like I said, you can attach an infinite number of lines and support on this thing, and you can do it all in about 2 seconds. And I'll just point out that we are on Facebook, so you should follow us, especially if you're an East Chicago resident, or someone who would benefit from the mobile market that the Northwest Indiana Food Bank puts on, or Catholic Charities puts on. Follow us. We do it at least twice a month. And that's where we make our announcements. Also, if you want to come by and visit, or if you're looking at that windowsill and you're like, that sure would look good if I had an aloe vera on it, or a nice little agave, you should come check us out. You should come see what's up. So having said that, I do see a question here that says, how long do the fish live? So I'll address that. So basically the fish take 9 to 12 months to come to maturity. At maturity, they're about a pound, like a good healthy female would be at about a pound. And how long do they live? They live as long as we let them, is really the bottom line. We have not harvested before here. I'm relatively new to the position. I was only hired in November. In November, we had a collapse. We lost all of the fish practically. And so basically they did a reboot, and then I was hired right at the tail end of the reboot. So we have pretty young fish. They're not quite at maturity yet. Probably by the fall they will be. And I am interested in doing some harvesting and seeing how that goes, doing some kind of fish fry or something like that. So we'll see how that goes, but they last as long as we let them. We could keep them like pets in an aquarium, and we could just let them continue to feed the system, or we can go in and harvest them and they'll kind of repopulate. They do a pretty good job of managing their population though. So yeah. And how do you get us on Facebook? East Chicago Parks and Recreation. Just that simple. So East Chicago Parks and Recreation, type it in. And if you're just coming by yourself, no, you don't need reservations. So if it's just you and your friend or whatever, we ask for groups over 7 to please email us first or call us first, set up a reservation. You can check out our actual eastchicago.com website, our city website, and go to the greenhouse. And we have a organization request form there if you're coming in a larger group. Because basically the idea is, if you're coming in a group of 7 or 8 people, you probably want like a guided tour. If you're going to come in and you just want to do your own thing, hey, you can come in and just do your own thing, even if it's with 8 people. But if you want us to like engage with you and be there to answer your questions and really make time to let you know what we're doing and that kind of thing, then it's always best that you give us a call and contact us first. So on Facebook, East Chicago Parks and Recreation, and then for reservations and stuff like that, just eastchicago.com would be the way to go.
Paxton, there's a question regarding soil and compost, and where you hear that for purchase.
You are smart. Good job asking that question. Okay, so when it comes to compost, if you're asking that question, it's because you know that soil and compost are silly expensive. So what we do is we buy from Hubingers. So we have, we have ourselves a big old F-250, so I can hop in the truck and I can go down to Hubingers and I can get myself a yard of their garden mix for, I think it's about $35 a yard. So it's a very, very, very good deal. And even most small trucks can get about a half a yard in them. No problem, no worries at all, especially if it hasn't been like raining and it's not completely saturated. And they do sell by the half yard as well. So that's what I would recommend you do. Unless you're made of money, you really shouldn't be going to, any stores and buying pre-made soil. It's really terribly easy to make yourself. So we get the garden mix from Hubingers, which is in Crown Point, I want to say Chesterton. It's in Chesterton or Crown Point. Don't remember which one. And that's where we get our compost from. And then we mix it with peat moss from Menards, which comes in the big 2.2 cubic yard, not cubic yard, 2.2 cubic feet bags. And that's $9.99, which is a pretty solid price for that. And it goes far because we're mixing it about half and half. So the compost that we use for 5 gallons of it, like to fill up one of our buckets, we're in the territory of spending somewhere like, $1.50, $2 for that. So we've done really well there. That I would really highly recommend investing in a way to figure out how to get compost with a friend or two and go in on a yard and go for it. There you go, Crown Point, Indiana, Jacqueline for the win. In the chat, Jacqueline just posted the Hubingers address. So they've done well. I'm really happy with their product, especially when you mix it with peat moss. I think it becomes a very beautiful thing when you mix it with peat moss 1-to-1 or 1-to-1.5, somewhere in there, depending on what you're growing. Hours and days that we're open, that's on the PowerPoint, and we are open Monday through Wednesday, 9 to 11, and then 1 to 3. So we're open in 2-hour windows in the mornings, Monday through Wednesday. Working on getting more hours that are more kind of towards normal people times and stuff like that. But it's tough. We're a city organization. We can only work during certain hours and all that kind of stuff. But we're working on it and becoming more accessible. So.
Paxton, I just have a quick question. As far as vertical gardening, if you were a new gardener and this is kind of your first time trying vertical gardening, what would you say would be maybe the top 2 or 3 vegetables that you think would be ideal to start?
I think you should do your tomatoes this way. Everybody loves a tomato, because some people don't like peppers, some people do like peppers, but everyone loves tomatoes, right? So if you're going to grow tomatoes, that's what you should do. You should grow tomatoes this way. Go get yourself a furring strip, stick it in the ground, and then dangle a string off of it or a couple of strings off of it and save yourself a bunch of headaches and learning the hard way. I would absolutely say that. And then the other thing that I would recommend is if you're really into squashes like butternuts and spaghettis and the really viney boys, and I guess when I say squashes, I'm also talking about melons as well. So if you're into the viney boys, the melons and stuff like that really go viney, get yourself 2 of them, get yourself 2 of those furring strips, stick them in the ground side by side, and then take your chicken wire and staple your chicken wire to it. And boom, you've got an automatic trellis. And then grow your cucumbers, your squashes, your melons, grow it up one side. And then when it gets to the top, grow it back around, and then you can keep looping it back and back, like that kind of deal with just those clips. It's one of those things where I feel like once you do it, you're like, oh, how did I ever, do it in a different way? It must have been like when sewing machines got like actual electric motors kind of deal. It's a whole different ball game what you have the stamina to do when you go out and you play that way. So yeah, the viney things is what I would focus on. The viney things.
Okay, perfect.
And this is a lot easier. And I just want to point out, this is a lot easier than going out and building a raised bed, right? Like this is an easier process than doing a raised bed, especially if you're trying to pinch pennies, especially because some of those raised beds, man, they want $50, $60 kind of deal. And that's not fun. Where with this, you can kind of unlimited pick a spot, throw down some soil, start growing, and you're in business in a really efficient way. So yeah.
Paxton, I want to thank you for being here today, putting together this great presentation, providing that tour through the greenhouse. That was great.
Well, thank you all. I hope you found something valuable, and yeah, hope to see you soon.